I'm pleased to present this paper, a multi-objective genetic algorithm for jacket optimization, today. My name is Jakob Mengshoel, and this is joint work with Burak, my former master's student. I also wish to acknowledge Bjørn Gunnar Eilertsen, Frode Strand, and Sigmund Mongstad Hope for their help. We are considering here offshore structures in the form of jackets. We know that offshore structures meet varying wave, wind, corrosion, and seabed conditions. The jacket is one type of offshore structure. It consists of tubular steel beams. The main cost of a jacket is the cost of steel in addition to the welding cost. Why are we interested in these jackets? Well, they support important offshore topsides such as oil and gas platforms, wind turbines. The dimension of the jacket varies with the sea depth and also the size of the topside. Jacket heights varies from tens to hundreds of meters, and the weight is measured in thousands of tons. There are different types of optimization when it comes to structures. We have topology optimization, shaping optimization, and sizing optimization. Let's talk a little bit about how to create a jacket. And let's start by considering the steel tubes, how they're connected, and how welding is used to connect these different elements that we have in the jacket. Secondly, let's look at how braces are positioned in order to reinforce the jacket. We also have so-called elevations, which are horizontal groups and of steel beams. And the number of these elevations is an important parameter that drives the structure and cost of the jacket. We have so-called horizontal bracing patterns. Those add rigidity to the jacket, and they also support conductors that transport material to the top side. Materials here can be things like oil and gas, as an example. Then we have the so-called row bracing patterns. And finally, we have the optimization of the overall structure, so-called global optimization, and fastening of the jacket to the seabed. A main parameter that drives jacket cost is the number of legs. And for wind turbines, we may only need 3 legs. If we have more demanding topsides, we may need 4 or more legs. Jacket design optimization is of interest because of the high cost of material, the cost of construction, installation, and it is an example of the broader problem of structural design optimization. Some of the factors here are the complexity of the analysis that's required, the accuracy of the input and the amount of input that we need to perform the design optimization. The design also needs to be construction friendly. It needs to be possible or easy to construct it. And we also have many objectives and constraints that a design needs to satisfy. And with all these things taken together, design and optimization of these massive structures is a very complex task. There are multiple goals, and this multi-objective perspective has been identified as being quite important in jacket design optimization by Zavala et al. Our particular method is called NSGA-J. It is a multi-objective jacket optimization genetic algorithm. It is based on NSGA-II, but there are several differences, including the following. We have a real valued representation. We have multiple and more complex operators in NSGA-J compared to NSGA-II. This applies to the mutation and crossover operators, and they are aligned with the 3 domains of structural optimization that we were just talking about. We're also avoiding duplicates in the population in NSGA-J. It should also be noted that the fitness evaluation for NSGA-J is quite expensive and extensive. It's a time-consuming process. Typically takes hours to complete. We get quite extensive results, not just one or a few fitness values. And from these extensive results, which we call result functions, we are then computing our objective or fitness functions. Let's look at the NSGAJ representation in a little bit more detail. And let's take as an example here a part of a jacket. You see here, these particular beams, just as examples, are pointing to genes in this genotype, this blue genotype that we have here. If we consider one particular gene, it has a corresponding element in what we call the profile. More formally, we have a genotype. It consists of genes. Each gene is a real valued allele. Each gene also has a lower and upper bound, and it has an accuracy. We represent this using the axis twin profile, which is a tuple of the same length as the genotype. You have the lower bound, the upper bound, and an accuracy. Refer to the paper by Kling et al. For further details about this representation. Turning now to the NSGAJ process, we have it summarized here in this figure, and I should also refer to Jan Burak's master's thesis for further detail. Our starting point is a good initial jacket design. We are then doing population initialization by cloning this initial jacket design by randomization. We perform this randomization until we fill the population. We're using a software called SESAM, and the SESAM software is the same as is used by engineers to optimize jackets. Result functions are analysis results from SESAM, and the computation of objective functions for the genetic algorithm, in our case NSGA-J, is computed from these result functions. Finally, we terminate after a certain number of generations of our genetic algorithm, and individuals in the final generation are considered the final computational results. Here's a little bit more detail about the result functions, the objectives, and the constraints that we're currently using. Again, we have here the overview of our approach. We have the SESAM software. SESAM software computes these result functions that we are showing here. And without going into too much detail, we note that from these result functions, we are then computing objectives as well as a constraint. The objectives are two. The first objective, F1, is the sum of the weight of the jacket and the weld weights. The second objective is the utilization. We have one constraint. It is a sum of the 4 result functions G5, G6, G7, and G8. And if this constraint GS equals 0, the individual X is deemed feasible. Finally, once these objectives and the constraint are computed, we can then go on with NSGA-J and perform reinsertion, selection, recombination, mutation, etc. And those things are detailed in the paper. Let's turn to the experimental results. The setup is as follows. We used a design of the Walhall flunk vest jacket. It's randomized, as I described already. And the initial population consists of feasible as well as infeasible individuals. Implementation is using C#. SESAM software is running in a one compute cloud solution, and it uses virtual machines which enable running of multiple evaluation in parallel. Each experiment was run with 50 individuals, and it was run for 150 generations. Each of these runs took 12 to 13 hours of wall clock time to complete. Use a tournament size of 3, and other hyperparameters and probabilities are reported in the paper, and I'll refer you to that. I'm going to present here 2 experimental runs, NSGA-J and NSGA-J. Let's first look at all generations. And we have here on one axis, on the x-axis, the total weight plus the weld weight. We have on the other axis, total utilization factor. These are our 2 objectives. We have here some color coding, where the early generations are red and orange, then they turn into green and blue, and at the end we have purple points for the individuals. We see here the first run on the left-hand side. We have the second run on the right-hand side. And we see both of these progress quite nicely from the early generations and onto the later generations. And we should also note that this setting of NSGA-J was arrived at after many careful pilot studies. And in particular, we started initially with using all the SESAM result functions as NSGA-J objectives, but this was not a good way to do things because we had too many infeasible individuals for the GA to make any meaningful progress. Interesting point here is that NSGA uses constraint handling that always prefers feasible solutions, and this can make it hard to navigate in the infeasible space. That said, we do see that both NSGA-J1 and J2, the second run, make interesting progress, good progress here throughout the generations. Let's turn to the second point here as far as the experimental results, and let's study the final generation in a little bit more detail. Again, we have the 2 objectives on the X and Y axis, and we note that, and we also have here as an inset in these 2 panels, the complete runs for the 2 cases that we are looking at. On the left-hand side, compared to the right-hand side, we note that the achieved fitness function values are not quite as good, and it may seem like NSGA-J1 undergoes some type of premature convergence. We see also the shape here of the population towards the later generation is a little bit more constrained, if you will, compared to this second run here. So there is some kind of premature convergence or similar that could be an interesting topic for future research. To summarize, we have a focus here on jackets, which are important offshore structures. This is an important and complex design problem. NSGA-J is a multi-objective GA for jacket design optimization. We take NSGA-II as a starting point, and it has turned out to be quite productive. We are in NSGA-J performing several additions or changes to NSGA-II, and these are notably the following. real valued representations in both the gene and the gene profile. We have multiple and more complex operators in NSGA-J. This includes for the mutation and crossover operators. They are performing different types of optimization, such as topology, shaping, and sizing optimization related functions. We're avoiding duplicates in the population in NSGA-J. We also have in NSGA-J time-consuming fitness computations due to the complexity of the jacket design problem. We have extensive results and not just one or a few fitness values. And our objective fitness functions are in fact computed from these result functions. For areas of future research, please check the paper. Thank you very much.